me, the way I would respond to it is you could go, there are two good responses. One is to hire Scott and his team to do it. The other would be, if you're curious about how it works and that's life-giving to you, the puzzle of it, then that, for me, I would have done that if that was life-giving to me. And I was curious, even if it was like, you have a spreadsheet, you say, am I optimizing my time?
Right.
I don't care, because that was fun and curious, and that could serve as a fundamental understanding that I could then leverage in the future for another connection that I would not have made but for that experience.
Right.
So
yeah, man, I'm stoked to have you here. It's funny, as I was doing some homework, I wanted to start this off with a commonality that we have, which I don't know that it's talked about by you very much, but both you and I were baseball players. Right? And
you look like a ball player. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's got to be the dark skin, dark hair, right?
Yeah.
They got that Latin flavor. In fact, I played in a couple big tournaments. The Perfect Game down right in Fort Myers, and then I did a tournament in the summer of my between freshman and sophomore year up in Cocoa Beach, which is kind of right down the street from you in Orlando, right? So, but
small world.
Yeah, man, it's very, very small world. It's interesting because I was thinking about that, and then just understanding your story a little bit. The baseball element seemed to have come in at a time where you were already entrepreneurial. You had already started working with some things in and around the current business that your father had at that point, and then I caught a wind of you having some technology savviness, and then it seems you segued into high school and college where you went the baseball route. So I want to open it up here where you had these opportunities at your fingertips, both between business and sports. And I'll sort of let you kind of take us down that road, and then I'll find some greatness in that to start to uncover, and we'll have some fun in this conversation, man. It's going to be a lot of good.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. It was I found myself with a lot of tools. I'm 6'8", I'm 6'8" now. I wasn't obviously 6'8" when I started playing sports. So
came out of the womb 6'8", walked out.
Right. Yeah. Man. I think the point of commonality between the two is I'm just a really curious person, and I remain curious. That's difficult for a person who isn't curious, because I'm always chasing squirrels. To a degree, I'm always thinking about, things that appear as a hard right turn, kind of non sequitur ideas. But I'm always thinking, I'm always curious. And it's not purely driven by any kind of, I'm going to change the world, or I'm going to make $1 gazillion. I'm just curious. And I can give you many examples of what that looks like. But the point, I guess, going back as a kid, I saw my first computer. I actually remember it was very visceral. I was 8 years old. I was at my grandfather's house. He had a Commodore 64. And for whatever reason, I had to know how it worked. I was fascinated by it. So I asked for the manual, got the manual, found a section on coding, and actually wrote, within my first use of a computer, started writing code, although it was remedial and it was basic. Literally basic was the language. But it was fun. And then sports, the same. It's, I had some, I was not fast. I didn't know I had a really good arm until many years later, but it's a physical curiosity. I like sports. So I would say the commonality between both was just being curious. And it's something I try to instill into my kids now. By any time they accomplish something, I'm always asking the question, I wonder what else you can do.
Sure.
It all, because I want them to be curious what else they can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll have to show you my Canon tattoo on my arm later that you mentioned. You have a strong arm, and so did I think I did. In high school, by the way, Ryan, got a tattoo on my right arm of a Canon. Dad took me down to the tattoo shop and hooked me up, man. It's still there. It's fade now. I don't know how hard it would throw nowadays, but it's still there.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's funny. I was just this weekend was teaching my kids what it meant to have a Canon. So that's perfect timing.
How incredible. Yeah. So you go down the baseball route, obviously. Are you doubling your interest at that point, meaning you have ambitions of playing in the big leagues, maybe not, and you're looking at what opportunities you could manifest in business? Are you double-minded? Are you more focused there? And so that question, plus you said something very interesting that I don't want to let escape us. I do believe a lot of people that are less focused and less concentrated today deal with chasing multiple squirrels. They have the squirrel mentality. And so the first question was the direction with baseball and the business. And then on top of that, I want to talk about how you've managed to get better with the focus and the concentration, or come up with something that allows you to consider the curiosity in your exploration, but also maintain the intuitiveness to maintain the level of direction that you need in order to execute at a high level for your business.
Yeah, no, I think I was probably even more than double-minded. So not double being the end of I was doing a lot, but no, I think one of my goals was to play professional baseball. I had a uncle who pitched in the major leagues. I had a great uncle who was up for the Hall of Fame. Was a Yankee second baseman. So baseball ran in my blood. Wow. So I kind of, that's something I aspired to, and would have, as a young kid, wanted to play professional baseball specifically. And then on the business side, I also was something I stated at a young age. I wanted to be a Fortune 500 CEO.
Wow.
I didn't even know what the Fortune 500 was. I guess I probably found out later it's 500 companies made up the Fortune, but the point, that was something that I wanted to be, was a business leader. So those would have been those are two memories I had of goals that I had at a young age.
Okay. Makes sense. So you stop playing ball and you segue to real life. Do you decide that the league is not the direction at some point because you realize like you're not as talented, or you didn't go, or you did try to go through minors, and then you said, you know what, I have this opportunity. So how does it pivot from when you're in the ballpark playing and drafted and making these decisions to then head in the direction of going towards where ultimately you are today, right? And so how does that whole process take place?
Yeah, so I guess to me, that's where I'd say, in one sense, the double-mindedness or the multiple tracks really played in that as a teenager, I started my third company, which was a software company. So I continued writing software, got better and better, and ended up, I was pretty proficient in about 13 languages. But I had my first two companies were tech companies, like software companies. But as I came up with this idea, I think it was 15, 16 years old. My dad, who is a great guy, is ADD, he's dyslexic, and he's a real estate investor. And so, there's many good things about that combination. There's many bad. The bad aspects are anything having to do with financial analysis and underwriting. And this is not to diminish my dad. It's just not his core strength. So, that was what I did in the family business, was helped him evaluate his investment. So I thought, this would be a great use case. I see a need, solve a need. I love software for the ability to solve practical needs. So I spent a whole summer. I actually spent almost 4 months, and he didn't even know I was doing it. So I didn't tell him about it. But I was coding, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day on the old CRT screens, the cathode ray that your eyes hurt. And man, my eyes would ache. But the point being is I wrote the software program for him. It worked. He told a friend who told a friend. Many years later, I had 100 and something thousand customers of my software globally. And I was making more than $1 million a year through college. I was making, I think and I'm going to probably be wrong on amounts and timings, but one memory comes to mind. I think I was going to a baseball game in college, and I was obviously on the baseball team, and I had just dropped off a shipment of software at FedEx Kinko's to ship it, to deliver a software order. And I think the order was like $160,000.
Wow.
And there's no expenses. I wrote the software. I'm the tech support guy. I'm the sales guy. I'm the shipping manager. I have one employee.
Incredible.
And that was me. So it was $160,000 straight to the bottom line. And I remember when, I shipped it. So I billed to be paid upon shipment. I went to the game and played. I think my coach I found out later, I think that game he made like $70,000, $80,000 a year. So it just was surreal to me that in that afternoon, I had made twice as much as my college coach did in the year. And he's a heck of a coach, world-class coach. So So I was kind of dual tracking it to the point where, I kept getting drafted. I got drafted by the Orioles, by the Angels, and kept getting calls by other teams. And, there was another realization I had, which was, if I had this business path, which I thought I could pursue and I really enjoyed it. But if I signed professionally, in a weird sense, I'm selling myself. Like I am the product being bought and sold and traded. And I actually, the more I thought about that, I'm like, playing as a young person, playing in college, that's for the love of the game. We had no NIL at that point, name, image, likeness, no contracts, no path to profitability. We just played because we loved it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you sign, now you're a product on somebody's shelf. They own you, they trade you, they ship you, package you. Like, that's a different thing. That's different. So, and I just said no and went a different path.
That's fantastic. What a fantastic route, man. I mean, as far as, so you're going to school, you're playing ball, and you're building a business, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, in essence. Fantastic.
Yeah, fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good. And I just kept going. It's not, that's basically it. And then, just kept the business path going. And, had I signed, I wouldn't have met my bride. That was something I remember. I think the next month, the Braves had called me after my senior year and said, "Hey, you've turned down every pro team. We don't want to waste a draft spot. If we draft you, would you sign?" And I said no. So they didn't draft me, which, smart on their behalf. And then I think the next month I met my bride, which probably would not have met her had I signed.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, and you guys are doing an epic job together. And I know we talked about this offline, which hopefully next time we'll get the two of you together in Vegas. That'd be a lot of, right here in the studio, by the way. This is exactly where we would be having the jam session. Yeah. So Ryan, you said something in there where you mentioned the two words, core strengths. And I think a lot about this as far as even in my own journey and having had several mentors along the way of, and I've seen different approaches where, like you just said, when you were younger, you were everything, right? And when you're getting started, maybe you have to wear all those hats. Do you believe that it's more important to focus on staying true to your core strengths in general and applying what you're good at and then rallying the people around you to help build out the other dimensions? Or do you think that it's either and or I'm just curious about how you evaluate how to move the needle forward, though you might not be good at that thing, but you need that thing in order to help the business grow. For example, like I'm in a studio right now. These guys are helping me produce this thing. I could technically go learn this and do it on my own and figure it out and go through that process when I'm growing this thing, or I can invest in these wonderful people here, Scott and his team, to help me do this and produce it and post-produce it and then send it to me. And I've invested in that way. So how do you tell someone or teach someone, or what is your advice on that in terms of that core strength motto?
It's a good question. And it's hard. And I'm probably the least prescriptive person probably in terms of my response. So like the example you gave me, the way I would respond to it is you could go, there are two good responses. One is to hire Scott and his team to do it. The other would be, if you're curious about how it works and that's life-giving to you, the puzzle of it, then that, for me, I would have done that if that was life-giving to me. And I was curious, even if it was like, you have a spreadsheet, you say, am I optimizing my time?
Right.
I don't care, because that was fun and curious, and that could serve as a fundamental understanding that I could then leverage in the future for another connection that I would not have made but for that experience.
Right.
So, but that's not wrong. That's not wrong or right. Again, like my dad, using him as an example, he should not try to figure that out, because it would not. He's not curious about technology. Doesn't like technology. That wouldn't be a platform building endeavor for him in the long run. So the point being is you have two different people, two different responses to the same problem, and both could be right. For that person. And there's also the now versus the then. I mean, there's the short term. Are you maximizing your time? Probably not.
Right.
But in the long run, there's so many points of connections and things that I've sown connections through things that I've done that, again, they're nonsense. They look disjointed and unrelated, but they're not to me.
Sure.
So anyway.
Yeah, no, interesting answer. And that breeds the question of making the decision, though, right? Because at that point, if you say there's no right or wrong answer, it ultimately comes down to the individual and how you've positioned it. Curious, life example, directional can help you with that, or you go and you get your time back or what have you. So is the answer really to make a decision versus trying to think yourself out of what you should do, and then you just waste time? Because you see where that goes. Like you say, hey, it could be this or it could be this. So then somebody's sitting back and saying to themselves, well, which one should I pick, right? Which one should I go with? How do I make the decision and then be comfortable with the one that is seemingly right?
Yeah, no, it's hard. And the concept of wasting time is also a curious one in that, I might look like I'm wasting time to somebody else. So they may describe my action as a waste of time, but it's not a waste of time to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, then the question is, who's deciding I'm wasting my time?
Okay.
Like, is it somebody saying that I'm wasting my time by what I'm doing when I don't think I am? If I'm sitting at rest or reading a book because I'm accomplishing something that on the surface looks like a waste of time because I'm not flailing around, I'm not sweat on my brow, I'm not, I don't look stressed. Then somehow I'm wasting my time. I'm not. I'm building capacity for, or maybe I'm just trying to kind of input concepts, knowledge, stories, or learn about something that maybe it'll be helpful in the long run, maybe it won't be, but I don't see that as a waste. So that's I guess that comment, just the wasting of time. I'm sure there's a lot. I do waste time, by the way, so I don't want it, but there's also things that I do that might look like a waste of time that aren't,
Wow.
Anyway.
That's good. No, that's great. It's good though. It's I like how you made it seem as though it doesn't matter what they think of you in the idea of wasting time. It's more what you're doing in the action that's determining how the time is being used, right? In essence.
100%. Because otherwise, it's then what you're doing is performative, and it's a performance to placate others, which is, I mean, it's like being an actor learning to play baseball, and it might turn out you're a really good baseball player, but not likely. So it's like you're doing things for performative reasons. You're not driving your ship. They're driving your ship.
Interesting.
You're just an actor in their play.
Right.
And that I don't, I'm sure I do that in ways I don't realize, but I try to be conscious not to do that.
Right. Yeah. I want to do my best in this time that we have to really taproot the genius and the intelligence and the ability for you over the last several decades to execute at the highest level in your chosen field. But I don't want to overlook the fundamentals of some of these things, right? Like even you probably can respect the fundamentals from back when we were playing ball. I remember practicing every day on the ball field. I'd have to go and do my outfield drills and, pick up ground balls where they would just be laying in front of me. And then I'd have to go out and, take fly balls and do all these basic things, right? And so I remember when we were in Bradenton, and I don't remember exactly what you said here, but I remembered to some extent when you were doing your presentation that you said that there was some number or rule of money, and you talked about taking $1 and turning it into something and something, and I hope that it rings a bell to you, because I'm trying to trigger the memory there where you shared something and it stuck with me, and I thought, how many people are not taught this about money and how it works? And obviously you and Jamie and the family have done tremendously well and are incredibly successful. That speaks for itself. But I want to get to sort of what helped you become that and what you had to grow through in order to get to that point, right? And where a lot of society suffers today and doesn't have some of these basic foundational and fundamental things in place, right? So do you remember what you said in that moment with that dollar thing that translates to multiple dollars? Please, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Could you share that?
Yeah. I was describing kind of the business, and let me, I guess, give context. I was describing the business, what what we're in the business of doing. And so we own storage facilities and mobile home parks. That's our, that's what people would know us as. We're a large owner of mobile home parks and self-storage facilities, but it really doesn't speak to the business. That's not the what, that's the what, not the how. And so the how we build our business and is kind of it's hidden. And so, and what I found many years ago through actual, there's a period where I was an options trader. I did a lot of it. And so I found commonality where, for the most part, businesses trade for a multiple of revenue. The more sticky the revenue, consistent the revenue over a long period of time, the higher a multiple the business trades for. And the best businesses are the ones that can pass inflation onto the customer. And mobile home parks and storage are good for that. But the comment that I had made is we're in the business of finding $240 dollars, which is a curious comment. And that's, and that's a true statement. So just to kind of build on what I just said, businesses trade for different multiples and different times in different industries. When Americans have more money than they know what to do with, they overpay for businesses. So they pay a higher multiple. And then when money, like the trend we're on now, the Fed's taking money out of the system, so multiples are coming down. But just to use for this example, in storage and mobile home parks, a really well-located asset would trade for, it would be called a 5% capitalization rate, which is basically the same as a price to earnings multiple in real estate. So for example, you take $1 of income on, let's say, $1 a year of net income after everybody's paid. If you take $1 and divide it by 0.05 rather, so 5% capitalization rate, that gives you $20. So a 5% capitalization rate is the same as a 20 multiple. So based on all of this, here's kind of how I put it together, and I'll go forward and backwards with it because it's pretty interesting. So kind of going forward, we're in the business of finding a dollar. So if you, myself, and your viewer today, we were to go to a property that, let's say, we own together, our goal would be to find ways to make more money. So more dollars. So let's say we found a way to make $1 a month, right, for the year. So that's $12 a year. So, and at a 5% capitalization rate divided by 0.05, if you have $12 a year divided by 0.05, that's $240. And so what that means is not only did I make $12 of net cash flow that I could then, distribute, I can pay my light bill, I can buy a car, I can whatever with. But the part that most people miss, because they're purely cash flow focused, is they miss the value of that dollar of cash flow. So if you look at most employees, they're on the cash flow side. They're paid out of the cash flow of the business, but have no access to the equity that is produced by their cash flow. And so, and then the funny part is you don't ask for what you don't know exists. So the point is, I don't focus on the dollar. I focus on the $240. So when you look at that, if we found $1 a month of net operating income, that's $240 of equity that has been created. We don't pay tax on it because it's unrealized. So you pay tax on the dollar, but you don't pay tax on the $240. It just gets better and better and better, and I can go on and on and on. But and just to kind of march this out, and then I'll go backwards with it. So that's $1. That's $1 a month is $240. So what if we had 100 units and found a way to make $1 a month for 100 units, right? So now that's what? That's 24 grand. So if I have a 100 unit facility, find a way to make $1 a month, we just made $24,000, right? What if it was $2 a month for 100 units? It's 48,000. I mean, this is where you can start. Now, going backwards, let's say your goal is to create $10 million of net worth for yourself, more than you have today. Then at a 5% capitalization rate, you need $500,000 of NOI. You need $500,000 of net operating income, which is a lot. And so your viewers probably like, that's a ton. That's more than I could ever do. All the negative, self-talk. And so let's break it down into more bite size. So let's say, I don't know. Let's break it down to monthly. So that's a year. You need $500,000 a year. So that's $40,000 a month. Still a big number. I get it. So let's say you can see yourself owning 1,000 units. So let's disperse the 40,000 a month over 1,000 units, right? So that's 40. I think that's $40 a unit, right? So, and let's give ourselves 5 years to do it. So divide the $40 per unit by 5 years. That's $8.
Yep.
So if you bought 1,000 units and found a way to add $8 of income per year for the next 5 years, you created $10 million of net worth for yourself, more than you had today.
Interesting.
Right. This is where you look at inflation being a negative thing, because you're like, well, inflation's awful. As a consumer, it is. But if your goal is to increase your revenue year over year and year,
right.
I mean, is anybody surprised that their rent goes up next year? No. Why? Inflation. You almost, I'm going to raise your rent because I have to, because of inflation, which is easier when inflation is. It's actually much easier to raise rent today than it was when inflation was nothing. So I actually have more ability to raise rents today to bring those $240 than ever. I mean, really, than the last 5 years.
So even for me, listening to those models, I always go back to my, just the journey I went on from school and never really having paid attention. And, you mentioned your dad had and has dyslexia. I have it. And so some things are more difficult for me to understand, numbers being one of them. I'm just straight shooting. And I've always had to really slow play it and slow down. So I'm trying to follow, and I'd have to go back, watch it, and then piece it together to fully grip it. And that's just how my learning works. But in the event that your origins of life, and I heard you say this somewhere, you guys were poor and you blue collar of all things, right? So where does the shift take place, and how can that apply to the same person out there that's listening right now that wants to figure out how to grow their wealth? Or in some cases, maybe, Ryan, it's better to say, no, you should start with this. What's the path to go from poor-minded to, and again, I'm just making this equation up, whether it's rich-minded or wealthy-minded or abundantly-minded or however we decide to coin it. I think you understand what I'm saying. But the journey of going from where you were, literally, of that mindset, and then being able to challenge that ideal and go out and create a mentality that has now helped you arrive to where you're at now, personally, I think is where a lot of people struggle and suffer and or don't know something or need exposure to something. So what would that route look like, Ryan, to help someone get in position, or at least moving along the pathway to get into a better over time financial situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard one. It's a really hard one to answer, because but there's some things that I've experienced, or there's ways that I think about things that have been helpful to us. But at the end of the day, I think things are so much more simple. And I've tried to keep things so much. We were so, I'm not a big goal setter, and I'm to certain people, I'm probably the worst person to hear talk, because I'm not a big, and I'll give you an example. If I would have set a goal many years ago, and there was one time when we kind of just Jamie and I threw something on the board, and our goal was to have $50 million of property in our lifetime, right? And I think in the last 12 months, we've bought more than that, in the last 12 months. So we blew through that by multiple. So we were wrong, right? So we were way wrong. So, I mean, good wrong, but wrong,
Of course.
So I don't, I'm not I'm much less about throwing a number out there and aiming for it as I am about having fun and being curious along the journey. And
That's
so,
powerful.
because I really don't have a destination in mind. Even now, it's it's funny. We had a potential investor of ours 2 weeks ago in Boise, Idaho, asked the question. He said, "Why do y'all still do this?" Because it's puzzling, right? Because aren't you at the destination? If this isn't it, what's your destination? We don't have a destination. It's a journey.
Wow.
I couldn't, anyway, I'm no closer to the destination than when I started.
Right.
But to kind of go back to to the beginning. I think to me, and I've realized this in my life, nobody ever has what they need on two sides. You never think you have what you need to get started. But once you get started, you realize you had everything you needed. But that deficit of internal belief was a test of faith on, do you truly believe? And everybody's had it. I mean, I now can tell you a list of things that I wish I had to take our business and life to the next level. But the only difference maybe for me compared to somebody else is I've gone through that deficit now 100 times, more than the next. So I'm not worried about it because I don't know, but it's going to be fun to figure it out, kind of we'll figure it out. Somehow it'll work out. But so that's one, is just really believing in yourself and not like there's maybe rhythms and practices. Look at yourself in the mirror. There might be rhythms and things you can do, but I mean, truly just believe in yourself. Like if you believe in yourself, then typically you'll take action wherever you think the next step is. And I think if you think you're smart and capable and all of those things, then you'll take that step. I can't tell you what that step is. I don't know. Your next step will probably be better for you than my next step would be for you. So your step's better than my step for you. So trust yourself, take the step, put the pieces together. And then the next part that I've learned in my life that really is true, at least as I've experienced it, is it's this kind of good old country boy saying that it stuck with me decades ago. And I loved it. But it's this concept that water joins a moving stream. And so in my life, and I've counseled a lot of my friends to do the same. It's like, a lot of times you're waiting for somebody else. You're like, okay, I see a path. I see an opportunity. I see something. I might not truly believe in myself. So in the absence of believing in yourself, you want somebody else to believe in, because it's not you, then it's who, and you're looking around for who. Right. And so you're basically waiting. You're looking for somebody else's stream to jump into. You're looking to be, you're looking to bring your water to somebody else's stream. But what I've realized in my life is, while that's true with a lot of people, there's power in realizing that's true. And that if you're the one who actually takes the step, takes the action and moves, you got 100 people looking for you because you were the one looking for you. Wow. So if you take the step forward, you don't have a clue how many people are going to jump in your river. Wow. You're going to be like, this is crazy, right? And the only thing was you moved and you did what everybody else knows they should have done for themselves, but they never will. So they'll join you. Right. Yeah. Because it's much easier to join than to start.
Yeah. So you're saying that we create an image where we think that everybody's got it figured out, but the reality is by taking the action, if we take the action, end up influencing and persuading others to have a bite of courage to jump in as well, because the reality is most people aren't where we think that they are. They're actually trying to figure out themselves too, right? They're trying to identify what it is that they need to do next. And if you take the leap of faith, they're like, wow, look at that guy. That'd be awesome. Let's go see if we can be a part of that.
Correct. Like to me, said another way, and this is anecdotal, non-scientific, probably wrong on my numbers, but if you have a population of 100 people, 99 are looking for the one person to hitch their wagon to. And so if you find yourself looking for that person, be the person. And you got 99 people waiting to say yes to you over time. But what you'll find is, as soon as you start moving forward, and it might take a year, it might take 2, it might take 3. I can't tell you when, but I will assure you it will happen, where people will start saying, yes to being a part, because you've overcome most of the obstacles that they still have in front of them. You've overcome. So, and again, most people won't, and I say this, I root for change. I hope for change. I pray for change. But I've experienced in my life, most people don't change. They revert to the mean. Right. So, so if there's this big, scary wall standing between you and action, and you find a way through it, there's a ton of people who will never jump over that wall. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's much easier to just jump in with you, because you're the one moving. You took the steps, and you'll likely make a lot more money, because you know, if nothing else, you took a step that they should have, but never did.
I think this might be the moment of all podcasts I've ever done where I'm, what's the word? Where I'm as enlightened, and I've had a lot of great conversations, but in terms of how you said that you're not really a goal guy and your approach is completely different than everybody else's out there that's like, say, sit down, write your goals and do this and go through this and go do that. And you're like, no, I've really just, you know, like found belief in myself and I took actions. And as a result of that, I've ran into things, which is baseline that. So you're saying, and again, you know, I'm fascinated by the fact that you're not telling me right now to go out and set a goal for myself more than it is, hey, just start taking the action, start podcasting, start reaching out, start asking the guests to come on, ask this to do that, try to do this, and then just keep doing that. And you're saying that you're gonna run into what it is you want eventually, right? But wouldn't you say that there's a fair amount or a healthy amount of needing to know sort of what you want or a direction to go to some extent there? And I'm only asking that because, dude, I can't argue with the guy like you that's super successful and has hundreds of millions of dollars worth of self-storage facilities and mobile home parks, right? So I'm not even going to go there. But I do want to just challenge that because think about the amount of information that people get every day where it's opposite of what you just said. Now, I do believe the belief and the action part and faith, of course. But in terms of like identifying what you want, where you want to go and working on that, I don't want to let that escape us because I'm like, all into that right now, kind of like white on rice.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's circular in that if I'm in a position where I don't want to be, I should be the last person telling me where I'm going to go. Like I'm already wrong. Like I feel like I'm wrong in my current position, but I'm going to be right about the next one. You know, and not in a bad way, but I'm like, I'm it's not, well, and I said in a different way. You know, I always thought I'd be okay. Like I didn't have any dollar, but I always thought I'd be okay because I work hard. I like people. I'm curious and I'm good at putting things together. And, you know, I noticed at a young age that to the point of the water joining a moving stream that historically when I move or when Jamie moves and we move in a direction, people come along. Like, and I've realized that and pretty unbelievable people that then interestingly enough, they joined our stream and then threw advice into our stream that we never would have had that then made us much better. Like I can give you an, just a quick example of that. But like in my mid-20s, to make a real long story short, I had a friend of mine call me who had been watching. He was, 35 years older than me.
Wow.
Right. So, and what attracted us to each other is we were of the same cloth. I was in my mid-20s building a business and he was very successful, was with Ronald Reagan in the White House. And for whatever reason, he liked what we were doing and thought it was fascinating. And so there was a friendship built on that water joining a moving stream. And so then he calls me one night, my mid-20s, and says, "Hey, I've got this friend I really want to introduce you to. I think you'd get a kick out of knowing him." Well, you know, at the time, I think Jamie and I had maybe 1,000 units or so in total. This guy had 55,000 units. And he goes, "Would you like to meet him?" And my comment, and this has been consistent through my whole life, like I don't try to play any kind of games. I told, and I literally said this, I said, "Listen, I will walk backwards from Orlando to LA. If that's what it takes to meet this guy, I'll walk backwards. There's nothing, I'll crawl." Yes. And so he called me back and he goes, "Well, good news. He'll meet with you." He's like, "Bad news. You don't have enough time to walk backwards. You'll have to fly. We'll meet tomorrow afternoon." And so, anyway, met that guy, you know, for dinner. And the whole time he's asking me questions. Jamie and I are meeting him. And the whole time he's asking us questions about our business, which bothered me because I didn't fly all the way out there to learn more about us or to talk about us. I wanted to learn about him.
Right.
And so at the end of the meal, he goes, he said, "You know, he's like, I'm really impressed with what y'all have done. And especially since it wasn't a family business, you didn't inherit it. Like, he just really impressed with what y'all have done." He's like, "I'm going to stay for another 30 minutes and ask me whatever you want. And if I'm knowledgeable, I'll answer." And so I asked him the question. I said, how do you get 55,000 units? How do you even get to that point? And I even told him, I'm like, don't tell me believe in myself. Don't tell me like, none of the raw, like how, show me how. Yeah. And so he took out a napkin and a pen, and it was a cloth napkin, which I thought was just old, because it couldn't be washed. But he took out a cloth napkin from the restaurant and drew out an organizational structure, an entity structure that I had never seen of, probably would not have heard of before. Went home from that meeting, did it, went from probably 1 to 5,000 units in a matter of a year. And then Jamie, my wife, who's just Einsteinian genius she's very bright IQ, but she's brilliant EQ. She then wrote this gentleman whose name's Brian. She wrote Brian a handwritten letter saying, just thanking him for investing in us. It may have been crumbs off the table to him, but those crumbs were seeds, and here's how this is what we're doing with those seeds. And then Jamie found through research the gentleman who has been in his 90s who had mentored Brian. Wow. And wrote him a letter saying, because you mentored Brian, wow, we want you to know he has mentored us. This is what it did for us. And so Brian calls us almost like teary-eyed on the phone, like calls Jamie saying, I'm blown away. Like, I gave you 30 minutes of my time, right? 30 minutes, and you did this with 30 minutes of my time. Wow. And he's like, when can we meet again? And so, and we've been, it's probably one of the closest friends we've had since then. And that was 17, 18 years ago. Incredible. But what created the opportunity to even meet a guy like Brian was a belief. There was something in us that he thought was of like kind, because like attracts like, mm-hmm, like hangs with like. Right. So there was something about us that he deemed was alike. Now, I wouldn't have said that. That would have been, if I would have walked in and said, I'm like him, I should be tarred and feathered and taken out back and like smacked around, because I would not have thought I was, but there was something in us he saw. And I think it was just the grit, the action, and so anyway, it's that water joining a moving stream, that effort, that grit, that, it could be ugly, but as long as it's real and it's moving forward, anybody who's legitimate will there's almost a sixth sense. There's a gravitas, mm-hmm, on people who have done it. Right. You walk into a room and it's usually it's not always the people who are talkative. It's usually the quiet ones. They look around and there's a nod, and it's like, yeah, I see your stars. Mm-hmm. I see them. It's an energy. So anyway, that's I think I'm just a real big fan of, rather than thinking about all the things I'm going to do and then think about what I've done and how can I tweak it and make it better. Wow. Like I'm more ready, ready, fire, aim kind of. Sure. Because and even in our business now, and I'll stop on this because I don't want it to be never ending run-ons, but no, it's great. Even in our business now, we have a 80% rule. Because there's this line of perfection is the enemy of progress, mm-hmm, and that becomes a convenient excuse, again, back to the beginning, of somebody who wants to start but is scared to start. Mm-hmm. Then it's not perfect. It's not there yet. It's not ready. It's like, so in our business, we do that too. So we have an 80% rule. If it's 80% there, pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. Like if it's, because you'll waste 200% of the time on the last 20%. Right. Wow. So we pull the trigger.
I believe that I understand what you mean by everything that you just said there, and someone seeing something in you. I feel extreme amount of gratitude. That's been my journey. It's weird. People always, it's like, how have you done this? And I go line up the amount of mentorship that I have of people that are playing at just this enormous amount of level in life, and I look back and I go, dang, every single one of them took to me and brought me under their wing and showed me what they knew and how to do things. And I execute. I was just talking to my fiance about this last night. I said, yesterday, or the day before, that those guys appreciated me because when they told me to do something, I did it. It was just like, it was done. And I went, and then I'd be like, hey, look, and here was the result. And they'd be like, damn, this kid's no joke. So they wanted to keep playing ball with me, right? Because they knew I'd go do something and get it done. And so that means a lot. And I think that making yourself more attractive and having that gravitational pull, like you said, Ryan, by having the grit and taking the action is a very compelling piece that I think a lot of us could do a better job of just by, rolling up your sleeves and getting to work, right? I mean, it's a big, big deal. I know we gotta crunch. I know you gotta get over to Edward, man. Big Edward Norton's waiting for big Ryan Smith right now, man. I'm just like this cool dude in Vegas. You get the big guys over here going to do some big deals. But I want to ask the question about, who you are today and what you know today. Not anything that you just said, and I respect all of what you just said. So many great nuggets that you dropped on us there. But if you could just remove everything you've just said and say, what does Ryan know today about building a beautiful life, creating an extraordinary circumstance, having a loving family, having an enormous amount of wealth, that it's not about the money as much as it's about what the money is doing for the kingdom or the world or the people. What do you know that the other people that don't have that know? Like, what is the difference in the separation there? Because now you've lived it, and hindsight's always 20/20, and it probably got a whole depth of knowledge there. If you can just transfer something backwards to the people that are attempting to go in that direction, what would be your answer to that?
I mean, on many fronts, there's many. I'm trying to think of the quickest, easiest way to most effectively answer that question. I think, and this is something I struggle with, which is why most people's advice are in line with their greatest struggle. At least it's the way I see the world. But so for me, I would say it's, I would say it this way, like focusing on what do we, kind of starting with the end in mind. What are we likely to be doing if you have a belief, a certain faith, belief, which I do. I'm a Christian, a Christ follower. But to me, and then that's important because it's the only way I can really answer your question, which is, and interestingly enough, this kind of it'll end in kind of a seeming competitive advantage, but I want to put it in this order so it's not me using faith as a lever tool. It's not. I think it matters in a certain sequence. So to me, if you say, okay, well, what I'm going to do for eternity, based on my belief, if it is in fact true, and I believe it is, but if it is, then what I'll be doing for eternity is worshiping, right? So that doesn't start on the other side of eternity. That starts on this side of eternity, and that's the Lord's Prayer on earth as it is in heaven. So there's an aspect, and part of our job is to make earth a little bit more like heaven while we're here, not just do what we want and then maybe we get to heaven. So the point in that is, if all we're going to do is worship, then our life on this side of eternity should be worship. And one of the first jobs we were given before the fall of man in the garden was to work. In a perfect world, work was required. So work isn't punishment. Work is an opportunity to worship. So to me, I think as a believer, one that loves his neighbor as himself and seeks to, seek the benefit of the city and to love the widow and the orphan and to discharge our work in a form that's worshipful. And what that means to me is somebody who goes to work and does their work with a form of excellence that draws other people to notice and say, geez, that's really neat. How did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did, and it's, well, I did it because, of the gifts I've been given. And this is my gratitude and my thank you to my creator for giving me these gifts. And that draws people in. And one of my heroes passed away on Friday. His name's Tim Keller. And his wife, many, many years ago, said something to this end. She said, excellence is the ultimate form of inclusion. So today we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a common, you might be on one side of the political aisle, another side of the political aisle as it relates to that acronym. But I don't disagree with her comment that excellence is the ultimate form of inclusion. We all are drawn to excellence. And it doesn't segregate in any kind of, weird way. We all want to experience excellence. And I think somebody who's working as a form of worship will produce a type of excellence in whatever field that is the ultimate form of inclusion. Even if you don't have a DEI officer or, it'll be inherently inclusive and unbelievably beautiful. And I think ultimately that's a competitive advantage because, when you go to a restaurant, you go to a theme park, when you go to a movie, you want excellence. I mean, everybody wants an excellent experience. And so if you're a business owner working for a reason and a motive that is different than everybody else, you might produce a result that's different than everybody else. And that's from a business lens only, that's differentiated and people will want it and people will pay for it. So it might be more profitable, which then leads to, okay, well, how do you give? And is it yours or steward or owner? There's so many, tentacles on that topic. But anyway, I think that's a competitive advantage is, seeking to take the gifts you have that no other human has ever had, the combination of gifts that you've had and worship with them in a way that, brings glory to God and brings hope to others. And, hopefully you're profitable in that pursuit so you can be a blessing financially to others as well. And anyway, it's a long answer. But.
Golly, I'm enriched, Ryan. That's an incredible answer. Long, but fantastic. So if I heard that correctly, it's in the excellence of the work that you do, which is the worship based on your faith in that circumstance. And it's in the excellence that creates the competitive advantage. And if I'm also going to add in something on top of that, I'm a big fan of Tom Brady, right? I mean, I'm a diehard Tom Brady fan. Whoever you root for, I don't care. Don't get me with all this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. But there's a reason for that. And I think there's the R word is the respect for that man because of how he plays the game and his approach to it and why he wins so much is, I think, baked in what you just said there, right? Which is excellence. And that's why he's admired. And that's why he's, quote unquote, the GOAT or what have you. But it's similar in all fashions, right? It's the same thing with what Kobe Bryant was with how he played the game and his level of excellence and the approach that he took every day to practice and how much he worked and trained to become who he became, right? So in the same sense, I think that's what you're saying. People are gravitated towards excellence, and that's via the work that they do to help them become excellent, correct?
Right,
yeah.
Right. And I think agreed in whatever field, whether you're a cook or a painter or a businessman or woman or an athlete. I think excellence is the goal. And ultimately, for a person of faith, the biggest, to me, worship is giving glory to, our Creator with the gifts that we've been given by which to give glory. So it's kind of circular, but I think if myself included, I think if we all sought to glorify more with our gifts, it would produce more excellence in what we do. And that's, it'll never be perfect this side of heaven, but I think the goal is to make it as perfect as possible, which actually gets to the second part, which I'll just briefly mention this because it's something I have to, there's a book that I used to travel with, like 10 copies of this book, and I'd hand them out to people on business flights that I noticed would struggle with this. But there's also this kind of oppression where it's almost like, okay, I've got a finite amount of time. Let's say you're 40 years old. You've got 30 years to accomplish everything you want to have happen in all aspects of your life. And if you don't, then you failed. And it's almost this like, and you can smell it on people. I say you can smell it. You can sense almost the oppression of goals in some sense where, it's not really them striving for a certain reason. It's them trying to fill an identity hole in the present. Like they've got a huge hole of identity that they're trying to, and it just smells. You can smell it. It reeks. And you feel for them because you can tell they're in a prison that they built for themselves using all the right external language and goals. And it's all of this stuff, but man, they're hurting in the present. But the point is there's this book called Leaf by Niggle and it's written by C.S. Lewis. It's like 40 pages. Somebody can read it in an hour. And basically the premise, it's a really unbelievable story, but the basis of it really quickly is C.S. Lewis J.R. Tolkien. So the writer of the Rings. If you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit. So he had this story in his head. He wanted to tell the story. He had not yet written the story, and he was in the middle of war in, I think it was London. Buildings were being bombed out. He actually thought he was going to die. So he had high anxiety. He thought he was going to die with this story in him that the world would never hear. So he stopped to write a book called Leaf by Niggle, and it's a short story about this character named Niggle, which to niggle means to like waste, to kind of major in minor things, said another way, to waste your time. But anyway, so Niggle was this painter, and he had this scene in his head of this beautiful mountainscape and this beautiful tree, and he set out to paint it. And to make a real long story short, there's much more to the story, and I'd recommend you read it. But at the end of the story, he dies, and he never finishes but a leaf in the painting. So he has this huge canvas, and all he drew was one little tiny leaf on the scene he had in his head of this mountain and this tree. He's just like, and so the point is, he failed, right? He had this vision, he had this calling, he went to paint it, and he didn't even, he failed boldly, right? And so the point in the story is he on the other side of heaven, he passes this pass, comes over this ridge, and laid out before him was that scene, right? So his heaven for him was to experience the scene that he never completed this side of heaven, right? So on one sense, he was a failure, but now he gets to go live it. And it's funny, at the end of the book, it tells the story of Niggle growing not tired, but curious of what's on the other side of the mountain. So he then leaves this scene to go explore what else is on the other side of the mountain. So the point of the book is, to the believing Christian who's doing something and has, time-based objectives, to a degree, the completion of everything we can do on this side of heaven is the other side of heaven. Like the completion is the other side.
Right.
So for me, that was like the ultimate pressure relief valve. Wow. It's like, I'm going to strive, I'm going to worship, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to love my neighbor. But if I'm ripped from earth tomorrow, then that's not a loss, right? Like, God doesn't, that's the beauty that's the unbelievable gift that I don't understand is why we're necessary, right? In God's kingdom. So it's not like God's kingdom is at a loss because I'm gone tomorrow. Right. No. But I'm blessed to be here today. Yeah. That's kind of cool. So that book is a
I think we let. Oh, there you're back. All right, we got you back.
Okay.
I missed the last 5 seconds.
Oh no, you didn't miss anything. I said it. It just that book has been helpful.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I love the de-pressuring of it, because I do believe that a lot of people put a lot of pressure, and I find myself in that trap sometimes included. Right? I mean, what human doesn't? Right? It's that question of, am I doing enough today? If I don't make my dreams come true, is it going to be, is it all worth it? And, you start having all this different self-talk, and bottom line, I'm going to get the book.
Yeah. It's a 40-page, it's an easy read.
I love it. All right, man, before we get out of here, 2 things. Are you wanting to share any personal pages, promos, social handles, anything like that? Are you that guy? No, you're not that guy. I love it.
Yeah, happy to help anybody who needs it. But yeah, anybody can email me at ryan@elevationcg.com.
There you go.
And my direct line is 407-602-7662.
Hey, guys, you better take him up on that. And then you can see Elevation Capital Group right there on his shirt. If you're watching us on YouTube, he's got it right there. That's good branding. Man, again, gratitude a lot. I appreciate you. This, I've thoroughly enjoyed it's always such a beautiful place, because it's like I have confidence in where I'll go with questions, and then the learning experience translates really well. I mean, the amount of wisdom you've brought to the table here is it's profound, and it's already marinating in my head about, okay, let me try this. Let me just continue to adapt my personal life based on what you've shared. I think the most profound thing that you shared was like less focusing on the goal and more just concentrating on the doing, and creating a river and stream, and then letting people come join your stream and your river, and making that the attitude of the direction that one's heading. So gonna play with that one a little bit. Ryan, last thing, two things. Feel free to do it in a minute, less than a minute. Anything that we didn't get to that you want to share, and then last question is always, what does always on the grow mean to you?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I mean, I would, to me, always on the grow would be, to me, there's a lot of, it would be to be curious. For me, it's to stay curious, to stay open to new ideas, and be open to pulling some strings in your life of curiosity and seeing what's on the other side. Even if everybody thinks it's ridiculous, so what? To me, for me, it would be curiosity. Yeah. It'd be to remain curious.
Fantastic, man. Yeah. Well, listen, my friend, I am so thankful you said yes to this and were quick in response. And if you're up for it, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would love to have you and Jamie here in Vegas when you come back. That would be a great one to sit down and talk about life together and relationships and parenting. I've got a baby now, and so it's a new one. I'm learning all these different things and figuring out life. So that would be fantastic, man. But in the meantime, I got to tell you, like, I'm walking away from this interview right now with a peace of mind where I'm like, the word is depressure, right? I'm going to go back today and do work and take care of business and all that. And I'm not going to have as much pressure as I normally put on myself because of this conversation, my man. So awesome. I appreciate you, and have fun with Ed, and hey, have a safe flight up to DC, and we'll see you here pretty soon, my friend. God bless you.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, my man.